Hi again. Hi there, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to Selko's Global Mycotoxin Review. My name is Marcella and I will be your host for today. And before I go and introduce our speakers, I have a few small announcements that I want to make. First of all, we are recording today's session, so don't worry if you cannot follow everything, or if you have to step out, or if you have to miss part of the session. We will be sharing the recording with you afterwards. Next to that, we have time for your questions. We are really looking forward to a very interactive session. So it would be great if you can type your questions in the question box. It should be right next to your live stream screen. You have to minimize, of course. If you went to full screen mode, you won't see it. So you have to go out of full screen mode, and there you should see the screen to type your questions. If you are joining us today on your mobile device, you should have a tab in the top where you can switch between the live stream and the question section. So please go ahead and enter your questions for Dr. Swamy or Mr. Avinash along the way, and we will have several moments during this webinar today to answer your question. So, without further ado, I would love to introduce you to our speakers for today. Next to me, you see right on my, closest to me is Dr. Swamy Haladi. Dr. Swamy is the Technical Commercial Manager for Selko's Mycotoxin Risk Management program. And he is taking care of the global support for all the regions when it comes to controlling and mitigating mycotoxin risk. Welcome, Swamy.
Thank you.
And next to Dr. Swamy, we have Mr. Avinash Bhat. Avinash is the technical specialist mycotoxins at Masterlab in the Netherlands, and he has been supporting us greatly with analyzing all the data. We have thousands and thousands of analysis results that came in throughout the year, and he's helping us with that. Welcome, Avinash.
Thank you.
So, just a quick few questions for you two gentlemen. Because some people might have joined us before, we do this webinar every year. And I just wanted to quickly recap, like, why are we coming back every year? Why are we here again?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mas. This is something, the mycotoxin challenge is there every year. And because it's a natural, these are natural toxins, the contamination doesn't remain the same. There are a lot of factors like the rainfall, and the temperature, all these influences the growth of the molds and mycotoxin production. So certainly something which will not remain the same is mycotoxins. There will be some changes, and that's the reason why we always have to come back and update what has happened and what is the potential way to minimize the risk.
I see. So it's important that we keep track of those changes. Absolutely. In order to be able to mitigate risks before they become too big. I understand.
Absolutely.
And Avinash, this year we are taking a completely new step. We are stepping into the world of predictive models. So you are going to share some experience with that, and our first moving into predicting. Why is it so important that we try to predict the risks that are coming our way?
Yeah, this already Dr. Swamy has answered this question. So this is and another thing is now it's a lot of interest is coming in globally because of prediction, what will happen next time, until how to protect our food chain. This is going to be very, very important. So that's why, prediction is going to be a key in the future.
So it actually plays a role further along the chain regarding food safety, even if we can have a bigger awareness of what's going to happen in the future.
And probably our ability to handle the big data, which was not there in the past. So that's also, as the knowledge is improving, so we have to get into that space.
I understand, because I understand this year we have much more data even than last year.
Yes.
We really have a big number, around 70,000 analysis results. So I'm going to step away now and let you take over, Swamy, for your data review. And again, just to remind you, ask your questions, and we are recording, so we will be sharing with you as well. Have fun.
Thank you so much, Marcel. Thanks, Avinash. Absolutely, it's my pleasure to come back and talk about the mycotoxin picture, outlook, whatever you want to say. And this year we are more excited that every year we want to give you something new and which is more relevant to the industry. So we always think about how the data is useful to the customer. That's very important, whether it's feed mill, whether it is integrators, whether farmers. Now, how best they can use this information is very, very critical for us. So moving on, actually, why this webinar? This time we are doing live. Last time also we did live webinar. Why? The question is very apt. You're spending your time and energy for participating. And I think one of the main objective is that, we would like to know what's the contamination dominated in 2023. And so that doesn't remain the same as I mentioned before. And then of course, which raw materials were under greater threat? We have so many raw materials used in animal industry. And some years you have more challenge in corn, another year you have more challenges in wheat. So it's important to get that perspective. And how do such contaminated raw materials will impact the quality of the feed and ultimately the animal performance. That's what is our objective. And how does this compare with the previous years? So we have been doing this for quite a few years now. And we have the data starting from 2015. So we have an opportunity to look at how this has been progressing or changing over a period of time. And most important, I think, for all of us is actually what we can learn from this profile, which is happening every year. Is there a nice, trend that we can follow? And also think about what is the action plan the feed mills can put in place in order to minimize this risk is also very critical for us. And of course, as Mars mentioned in the past, the historical data, how we can use to predict, which Avinash is going to take up at the later part of this session. This slide, I'm sure you've been seeing this for quite a few years now. I love this slide because that gives an overview of what the mycotoxins are. And of course, we deal with the big 6 mycotoxins, namely Afla, Okra, Don, Zeralanon, Fumonisin, and T2 toxin. Of course, with T2, you also analyze HT2 toxin along with that. But what about masked mycotoxins? We don't get into that because it's not something we can do as a quality control at the feed mills. And then emerging mycotoxins, so just to name a few, N-atins, mycophenolic acid, and many more are coming into the picture. So yeah, they are there, but there is something not practical to do for a feed mill to operate. And I think another important factor coming in, I'm sure all of you are aware of the disruptions that are happening today in the trading of the raw materials from different parts of the world. And there are a lot of disruptions in the transportation. For example, in Suez Canal, what's happening in the Panama Canal, and the war in Ukraine, the Middle East, all these are impacting the time taken for shipping the raw materials from the production facilities, production countries like Brazil or US, to the consumption countries. Many of them are in Asia, in Africa, and Europe as well. So you see a lot of these being impacted due to the geopolitical and various other challenges, and certainly we would like to throw a little bit of light, and hopefully next year we can present to you, due to these disruptions, does the challenge increase or remain the same, and what kind of toxins became a significant part in 2024. And this is all possible because of our collaboration with our various teams, Masterlab, our GSS team, and of course with our feed additive team within Nutreco, Selko team as well. So there are a lot of our rapid tests methodologies like MycoMasters are put in different parts of the world. And along with these MycoMasters, we are also using other methodologies, using even HPLC, LCMSMS. We are using some of the lateral flow devices, ELISA. So there's a lot of different instrumentations are being used, and you will see that may have some impact as we go through the slides. And all of these, the data comes to our central database system, and that's what we are using today to explain to you the challenges we might have faced and we will be facing in the coming at least in the first half of the 2024. So just to keep some tab on some of the common terms I will be using today. So wherever you hear me talking about percent contamination, it actually means out of 100 samples or we have done, how many of them are actually contaminated with mycotoxins above the limit of detection. That's the percent contamination. Something we have introduced this year is the percent contamination based on the guidance values. The practical guidance values we have developed, and some of you are aware of that. And based on that, how does this percent contamination looks? As a factor of common sense, of course, when you put those guidance values, the percent contamination will come down. Then concentrations in ppb is very important. As a veterinarian, for me, it's not about contamination percentages, but how much of the toxin is actually getting into the animals and causing toxicity is very, very important. And you see the numbers in parts per billion because some people express in parts per million as well. So we consistently keep it as ppb. And then of course, grains we are talking about, the grain byproducts, protein meals and other protein products. So there are different categories. Of course, the grains is as such the intact grains without any processing. The byproducts of grains means undergone some amount of processing. The protein meals, of course, they have gone through the processing as well. And other protein products, we come across in our livestock industry. So when it comes to the data generated in 2023, there is about 27% more number of tests we were able to do in 2023 compared to 22, and 35 countries were represented in this. The raw materials made a major chunk of this, 67.4% of the data, and the complete feeds like poultry feed, swine feed, they made around the 32.6% of the data set. And then these are the countries, quite a few countries in Europe, North America as well, a lot of data from Canada this year, LATAM, Middle East and Africa, Asia, of course, to a different degree. The sample group, again, as I said to you, we classified them into different groups because it's impossible to go by every feed sample or every raw material in this stipulated time. So we put them together so that you get a meaningful information out of that. We have some analysis done on the silages also. These are the various samples starting from maize all the way to the grass silage. There are so many different ingredients in between. And our objective is to keep increasing this raw material list. This is very important because as the cost of the conventional raw materials are increasing, we need to look at alternatives, and these alternatives vary based on which part of the world you are in. And so we would like to add more and more of these raw materials into our analysis parameters. Let's look at now the global mycotoxin outlook on the entire data set. So in the next couple of minutes, what you hear from me is that the analysis on the old data, we are not differentiating here the feed or the raw materials. It's a complete data set. So like what you can see in this very busy table, I highlighted few points here that unlike the last year, the Zaralan contamination was quite high. Almost 76% of the samples we have analyzed had Zaralan contamination above the limit of detection, followed by, of course, the T2 toxin and fumonisin in this case. The average concentration was as expected for fumonisin was the highest, 945 ppb, followed by DON. So this is an expected lines. And then the median, which we believe is the more accurate information because of the very few samples with high concentrations of toxins can skew the data. So we believe the median is the more authentic way of presenting the information here. The maximum concentration is you can see there up to 150 ppm of DON. It's a very, very high level. And then we also looked at within those samples which are positive, and then when you look at the average and the median, of course, the concentrations will go up because we have not considered those which are negative in that. So the trend is very similar. The fumonisin followed by DON, and then it's followed by zearalenone concentrations, and then T2, aflatoxins and ochra. That's the way most of the years you see the mycotoxin concentrations showing up. Just pictorially, a little bit easier for you, the same information, zearalenone followed by T2 and then fumonisin. It's very interesting. The DON overall contamination was slightly lower this year. That's a bit surprising. And again, this is maybe related to the climatic changes and how the fungus is looking for a specific conditions for the production of DON. And you can see on the right side there, right hand side, the concentrations. You can see there for fumonisins, on an average concentration somewhere around 1000 ppb, and for DON, which was around, I would say, 400, 500 ppb, so as I mentioned before. So the way we are describing here, box and a whisker model here is really helps us to see the distribution also. So if you look at the aflatoxin, there is a lot of variation between the average and the median, there are a lot of outliers as well. But if you look at DON and if you look at the fumonisin, the difference between the average and the median is lower, indicating the data is more robust, there is a less variation happening there. So presenting the data this way would give us more confidence in understanding, okay, what's the reality rather than just presenting the average values. This is a bit of a busy slide, but what we did was we looked at the monthly evaluation of these various toxins, January to December. You can see there very clearly that general trend is in the beginning of the year you see a little bit more toxins as compared to the middle of the year and again picking up in the last quarter. That's the more of a general trend, but that doesn't remain the same for all the mycotoxins. In this case, for example, for afla, there is a little bit of variation in the beginning as well, and that all because of the nature of the fungus. Does the fungus is more of a field fungi or is more of a storage fungi? And aspergillus is a classical example. It can grow in the field, it can grow during the storage as well. So you can see a bit of an erratic approach there. And moving on to the fumonisin, quite consistent across. And DON, again the similar trend what we mentioned before, peaking in the beginning and the end of the year. And zearalenone, this year zearalenone was quite interesting. You can see there the majority of the contamination for zearalenone was there in pretty much throughout the world. That is indicating that during the storage, potentially zearalenone can be produced more than the DON. So looking at raw materials, because I get this question a lot. Recently, my colleagues from Ireland were also asking about this. Okay, which raw material is more susceptible to which fungus and which mycotoxins subsequently? So we tried to look into this data. What we saw, you see in this picture, a lot of bar diagrams wherein you see the blue color is quite prominent, and that is the T2 toxin. And where it is prominent, it's prominent in barley. So that's a small grains. Wherever the barley is being grown can have T2 contamination. Oats, as expected again, used in some parts of the world, especially in Europe, you see again T2 contamination is high. So what is the next bar diagrams you're seeing there is related to DON, which is again you can see quite a bit of that in oats and also wheat as expected. They can be susceptible to the Fusarium graminearum fungus. And then you will see a lot of the pink color bars there leading to zearalenone contamination. And in between, only in maize, you will see high levels of fumonisin contamination. So historically, we all know that the corn and corn byproducts contain high levels of fumonisin. That is known. But now you are seeing here and there levels peaking for wheat also. That is something we need to keep in mind and analyze the fumonisins for various raw materials, not just restricting to the corn and corn byproducts. So the maize is such an important raw material for livestock and poultry. That's why we went a little bit deep into that and see what's the trend for 2023. The trend, as you can see there, it's not the same for all the toxins, right? So you see aflatoxin, this is in concentration, not the percent contamination. This is actually very important for animal toxicity. In the beginning of the year, there is a little bit of a lower concentrations for afla in maize, then picking up. Dawn is completely opposite. In the beginning, more coming down and picking up again. And if you see Zaralanan, a bit of a similar trend there, but not exactly the same, because although they're produced by the same fungus, and maybe there are some subspecies within those fungus that can grow and produce Zaralanan during the storage. So, but you look at fumonisin right below the dawn, it's a mirror image that indicates the conditions required to produce dawn are completely opposite of what is required to produce fumonisins. And interestingly, in Europe, we are seeing more and more of the fumonisins coming in because of the changes in the temperatures. So yeah, this gives a very nice overview. And T2 you see a strike going down over the months, and okra is a V shape there in terms of how much of these toxins in every month getting into the animals. So I also asked Avinash to look at how does this compare over the last 4 years, right? Because we have quite a good data there. And again, for each toxin, it's quite different. If you see there, in 2020 for aflatoxins in maize, and it's kind of stay the same for 21, but in 22 it kind of went down, but 23 it becomes a bigger beginning of 23 or late 22 or beginning of 23. It's quite high levels of toxins, which we have witnessed in particularly in Europe. And then we are expecting that level was in the middle of the year was a bit low. So you can see that. I don't want to get into all the details. Of course, you will have the presentation. You can go through that. Just to give an idea that, as Mars asked in the beginning, why do you guys want to do this every year? This is exactly the reason, because the pattern does not remain the same due to the interference of the nature in terms of mycotoxin production. And looking at the grain byproducts, of course, we all know that the grain byproducts will have a higher contamination as compared to the grains themselves. That is very clear here. The peaks are much more higher for almost all the toxins, and you see aflatoxin pretty much all the byproducts we tested here, the maize, DDGS, rice byproducts, and wheat bran. And one thing is very classical here is that generally the mycotoxin levels in rice is lower, right? And that's why some of the Asian countries and maybe in other countries as well, they tend to put a little bit of rice or broken rice into their formulations to manage the mycotoxins levels. So that's a good strategy. But when it comes to the rice byproducts like rice bran, especially Zaralanan level, you can see there going up, and also for fumonisins. So it's a very interesting strategy. More the raw materials, the nutritionists are aware of that. More we use, the less chances of getting a particular mycotoxins coming into the picture. Of course, they need to manage the nutrient profile of the final feed. Protein meals, that is something many times we neglect, and most of the analysis, as you saw in my slides, were done on grains and grain byproducts. A less number of samples analyzed on protein meals, but this slide again very clearly shows that we should not neglect them because they do contribute to quite a high levels of aflatoxins, zearalenone and T2, pretty much all the toxins depending upon the type of ingredient. We tested here cotton seed meal, we tested maize gluten meal, rapeseed meal, sunflower, groundnut. We did it in predominantly for afla and few of the toxins because groundnut meal has a lot of challenges with aflatoxins. So protein meal certainly we need to give attention to see what kind of toxins coming in these. For the dairy, the ruminant segment, silages, yes, they are not easy to analyze for mycotoxins due to number of reasons, but we always make an effort to do that, evolve our technology to match the requirement for silage analysis. And you can see there very clearly, compared to even the traditional raw materials, the mycotoxin levels are quite high in silages. Pretty much all the toxins, contamination you can see there, and the lowest being 43% for ochratoxin, which the cows can manage quite well, but all other mycotoxins are above 50% of contamination, and some of them even touching close to 100%. And looking at concentrations on the right side, again as expected, here the DON and FUM are pretty much close to each other. Usually you saw in my previous slides, in monogastric animals we see more fumonisins, whereas here the DON also quite significant levels. And zearalenone around 80 ppb or so in this picture, which can be challenging to the reproducing animals, especially the dairy cows. So yeah, silages are an important raw material because it constitutes a significant portion of TMR which needs to be analyzed. So that's about the raw materials, because quite a few of them, still we have a lot of other raw materials, Marcel, but given the lack of time, I can only spend so much of time.
Time for some questions actually related to this, the data set and the raw material section. We see some questions coming in, so great. At least it tells me that you have found the question box, so that's fantastic. Please keep them coming. First of all, a question that came in about what is the difference in mycotoxin concentration between continents? Will you be touching upon that later on?
Yes, indeed.
So
indeed, will be coming in the next few slides, yes.
So
indeed,
a bit of a cliffhanger, that's still coming. Actually, a question that's related to the, also about the seasons. Do the monthly concentration trends take into account the different production seasons in the northern and southern hemisphere, or does it depend more on where the biggest number of samples is coming from?
Great question. I think, the season is not the same throughout the world, right? For example, if it is a winter in northern hemisphere, it will be a summer in the southern hemisphere. Yeah. So, great point. I think that's we should take into consideration. So far, we have done by region, like for example by continent-wise, the major continents. But probably that is something probably in the prediction models, depending on the seasons, the winter, we should look at a little bit more in detail.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Another question that came is, what is the main reason that you feel that is behind the higher fumonisин and afla numbers, especially 23, 24 in maize? Yeah,
I think the fumonisин is a very, compared to all other mycotoxins, it's recently discovered. Not recent means 5 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, but all other mycotoxins were discovered much earlier than that. And that's what I was mentioning. The thought process, including me, so far is that fumonisin is a major problem in corn, and corn byproducts. But what we are seeing is we see higher levels in other raw materials as well. Yeah. So more analysis should be done. A classical example is Europe. Europe, I never assumed will have a challenge with fumonisins because the growing conditions are cooler. And the fumonisин production requires a higher temperature and also some kind of a drought situation which is happening in Africa.
We've seen that, yeah.
Yeah, in
Also
Asia.
in Europe now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Latin America as well. Brazil is known to have a lot of fumonisin challenges. But I less anticipated this in North America and in Europe, but it's increasing.
It's increasing.
So
yeah.
yeah, I think you will see some few answers maybe in the later
Yeah.
slide. Yeah.
Yeah, the next question is more about the impact on the species and on the feed. So again, I think you
Yes.
will touch upon that right now. So let's continue with the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Marcel. So moving on, looking at the feeds, I think that's what is more important for nutritionists or veterinarians. Looking at what is the impact, what was the impact, and of course, what can be the impact in the coming months as well. So myself and Avinash, we try to analyze, okay, what percentage of these poultry feeds are actually contaminated? You see that on the slide here on the left-hand side. So very clearly, we divided even the broiler and layer feed separately. We had enough number of samples to do that. And what we saw was a relatively, on an average, we saw a little bit more contamination for some toxins in layer feed, which can be expected because in layer feed we tend to use a lot of byproducts because the layer bird can manage the fiber a little bit more than the broilers. So that's why we see a little bit more overall trend of contamination in the layer feed. But of course the broiler is right behind it. And in fact, some of you may be aware that there are some discussions going on that the mycotoxin limits for broiler feed should be much lesser than what it is today because broilers can be, the gut health of the broiler can be quite sensitive to these mycotoxins, especially DON and fumonisins. So looking at the concentrations on the other side, we also see some of the toxins are more in broiler feed, some of the toxins are less in broiler feed. So this is all depends upon the raw materials that are going into these feeds. And again, this is a global data. Pretty much maybe some of these numbers are compromised because of the regional information. So we will see maybe in the future try to put the regional information as well to make a better comparison. But overall, very high level of contamination in feeds as compared to the raw materials. So then we also thought about, okay, it's easy for us to say that a lot of feeds are contaminated. The contamination is different, but if that contamination is really causing a problem in animals, is different. I think we really need to differentiate this part. A feed may be contaminated because it is above the limit of detection, but it's maybe still safer to feed to the birds. So that is why we making use of the practical guidance values. So we have put together based on my experience and also some scientific evidences based on these numbers. I will not expect you to go through these numbers quickly. But what we saw by whenever we input this information, practical guidance values into this equation, all of a sudden you see a lot of green bars there. So which is good because I would say just take an example of zearalenone in this case. Yes, zearalenone contamination is very high in poultry feed, but zearalenone is not very toxic to poultry, right? So it's not a big deal. You can use if it is a lot of zearalenone in there. And then if you look at T2, 71% of the feeds we analyzed were okay in terms of T2 toxin. Okra is even more, 92%, because we see the okra levels are going down globally as compared to in the past. But fumonisins, on the other way, is only 36% of the feeds were safer, right? And that's a big concern because fumonisin levels are going up, and that's why some of the regulatory bodies are trying to lower the amount of fumonisins coming into the broiler feed. DON, yeah, 62% of are safer, and then AFLA was 42% safer in this case. So by doing this kind of analysis, it gives us a more realistic information to the customers that yes, the feeds can be contaminated, but we should also know what is the concentration that is actually causing challenges to the animals. Then the same thing we apply to the pig feeds. So again, you can see we divided them in the fattening pigs, piglets and sows. As expected, the lower level of contamination was seen in the piglet feeds. Again, giving a very clear indication that the raw materials that are getting into the piglet feeds are much more cleaner per se because they are young animals. So that is very well understood and confirmed by our data. But we applied the practical guidance values again. So you see here, just as an example, for fumonisin, for the pig feed, fattening feed is 74%. But if you take that again back into the fumonisin, into in the fattening part, much more of these fumonisin contamination does not really cause challenges in pigs. So it is really important that we consider the percentage of contamination or whether the feed is good or bad, not just based on the presence of toxin, but also based on the concentration of the mycotoxin. Ruminant feeds, similar story there. You see quite a high level of contamination. What I mean in ruminant feeds is the concentrate portion. It's not a silage portion. It's a concentrate part of what we are feeding. And you see a T2 and ZIA showing up to 74 and 75% of contamination. But when you look at actually, are they really challenging to the animals? In case of cows is a different story because we have a different guidance values for cows. They are very sensitive animals. And for the adult, the milking cows, we have a different number. So yeah, aflatoxin, of course, is a big challenge. You need to maintain the aflatoxin MN level. That's why only about 40% of the samples were okay. Whereas come to ZIA, because of the reproductive challenges the cows can face, only about 68% of them are safe to feed. So yeah, we need to take these into consideration based on the species. And then pet food, we included pet food. We have quite a number of samples from Latin America and some other regions as well. And what we saw very strikingly, the ZIA levels, zearalenone levels were quite high in pet food, and we know that can be a big challenge on the reproductive system of these pet animals. So the concentrations of zearalenone were close to 50-60 ppb. Which can be a challenge when you put together other mycotoxins are also in there. What about toxicity? Again, zearalenone, what we saw was and DON were the major challenges coming to the canine species in this case, and all other mycotoxins were relatively safer. So DON and ZIA face a bit of more challenges to the pet animals. Aqua, we included that because quite a few samples were analyzed, and this is an area where more data is needed for sure. But again, we saw quite a high level of contamination in fish feed. Same story, just like in broiler feed, layer feed. Fish feed has got a relatively poor quality raw materials compared to shrimp. So that's why you can see higher levels of mycotoxin contamination there. What about the toxicity? Out of those positive samples, how many are actually toxic to the fish and shrimp? Here, the toxicity percentage is quite high because most of the mycotoxins are quite toxic to the shrimp and fish, and we have developed the practical guidance values again for that. You see a lot of reds there, a lot of orange and yellow. So that is an area where we really need to keep an eye as they are very sensitive species, and more work needs to be done globally on this area. So some of you are asking the question about the regional outlook. Again, I really don't have time to get into all the details, but couple of slides on the entire data set. What we saw was very clear in this slide. Let's start from Europe. What's the number one challenge in Europe we saw in terms of contamination percent was the T2. because Europe uses a lot of small grains here and there, like barley, oats, wheat. So yeah, that is expected to have a higher T2, followed by fumonisin and zaralandan. And fumonisin is a surprise to me. So that's what we need to look into that. Then Asia expected AFLA very high, followed by ochratoxin, that is also expected, fumonisin, and of course DON and T2 levels are low. But I think also we found that in Asia they are not doing enough analysis on DON. That's something we need to continue to educate the market to analyze more DON in the Asian samples. Africa and Middle East, zaralandan again, followed by AFLA. Latin America, we saw high levels for zaralandan, followed by fumonisins, that is expected lines. And North America, you see a lot of contamination there. And this is predominantly from Canada in this year. And what we see very clearly that the higher percentage of contamination can be related to some extent the higher sensitivity of the analytical methods, right? If the method of analysis is very sensitive, every sample will come out as positive. But does that really cause the toxicity animals in the question? So that's very, very important. In the next slide, you see particularly in North America, yes, the contamination was very high, but you're looking at some fumonisin particularly was around 100 ppb, which is not going to cause a challenge in any of these species. So again, proving the fact that what we have been mentioning over the last few years, concentration should be given more emphasis. So yeah, I think another question and answer session briefly.
So thank you. That's quite a lot of information that came our way. Thank you for sharing and taking us through all those figures and all those graphs. We have time for one or two quick questions before I introduce Avinash. An interesting question that I found that came in was related to the ZIA in poultry, where you mentioned, there's high levels, but the risk is not that much because they're not so sensitive to ZIA.
Yes.
But the question was like, what about the long-term exposure for breeders if they're consistently exposed to ZIA? Will it then have an impact?
Well, that's a $1 million question because nobody has done a long-term study in ZIA. And with the limited information we have, I wouldn't be too much worried about ZIA, to be honest with you, in poultry. I know there are some anecdotal evidences, people saying poor hatchability, fertility, when there is a ZIA in there. But the research what is available, you really need to have a very, very high levels of zaralandan. Because remember that the mode of action of zaralandan is actually sitting on to the receptors on the reproductive system, especially the ovaries and the uterus. In this case, in poultry, those receptors are very limited. Okay. So it's a very classical reason why the poultry may not be so sensitive. So in pigs is completely opposite. In cows is completely opposite, right? So it's very important that we understand which toxin is toxic to which species, because that way we can also make use of the raw materials better way.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not just about the toxin itself, but knowing what effect it has inside the animal to understand whether it's high sensitive or low sensitive or high toxicity.
Exactly. Yeah. In some cases, the fed, we have evidences of 800 ppm is a very, very high level, and they didn't find much, right? So, and unlike the other toxins, zaralandan doesn't interfere with a lot of other stuffs. Okay. Like in gut health and immunity at low levels. At the levels what we see is 80 ppb. Yeah. It's not a very high level, right? So it's important because we are in the era of limited resources, so we have to better make use of those resources. Yeah.
There are a few more questions coming in, but for now, let me welcome Avinash to our stage. He is going to explain a little bit more about predictive modeling that we are exploring within Selko and Masterlab and Nutreco. So Avinash, without further ado, please go ahead.
Thank you, Marcella. Thank you, Dr. Swamy. I will take up this is regarding the prediction model. This is a new buzzword. Actually, recently we are hearing during a mycotoxin conference 2023. That was a lot of papers were presented on how this is how we can predict the modeling on this mycotoxin model. So I already mentioned, okay, why this is a prediction. The mycotoxins are actually, this is a challenge due to the climate change, because a lot of climate change is happening and there is an increase in temperature due to the global warming, and the pattern of the precipitation is changing, and also it's also affecting, because its change is affecting the pathogenicity. So that's all happening, and this is causing a lot of changes in the mycotoxin behavior overall. So this data is so that's why this is going to be for to understand, to give us a better future, or in the safety side of the food chain. So that's going to be a very thought process. So that's we need to have some sort of a prediction of the data. So, or mycotoxins. So because already the prediction is already common in other places like weather forecasting and those kind of a thing. That's how that's also coming into pictures like mycotoxins. So here for modeling, so that's what is important. So data is very critical, because we need really a big data. So then also it should not be, the quality of data is also a very important here. So the quality is going to be actually plays a major role in the forecasting. Global mycotoxin data, so we have used here a global mycotoxin set of 2020 to 2023. This is around 270,000 data points. So from that, so we for that one, because we are just as an initiation of the data modeling, so we have considered, okay, let's look into an aflatoxin first. So because it's a very wide aflatoxin first. So as already mentioned, so aflatoxins are, so they're present in both environment and also in the storage, because it's that's a fungus, and it is affected by the temperature, climatic changes, the humidity, everything, because that is causing, the season has got a more effect on this, and also predominantly it is produced in the storage, and it's already grains are produced. So most of the cases, for example, if you take Dawn or Fumonisin, because it's already they are in the grain itself, and you got the grain already they are formed. So that is going to be a little bit difficult, because to predicting model, because we need a little more data on the pathology of during our climate, during the harvest season, and also growing season of the plant. So, but for that is much easier for us for aflatoxin. So that's why. So we starting with, we used aflatoxin for this developing model. So we have taken actually around 60,000 data points for aflatoxin application, and we made a prediction model for 4 regions. So first one, this is I will take into Asia. This is Asia is having, because we have seen in the picture, because we have got a lot of, the highest number of aflatoxin contamination is happened in Asia. And if you look into this in from 2020 to 2024, so there is a lot of spikes. So because this is this model is based on the monthly average of yearly, this monthly average data. So this is first actually trying to develop a model based on the monthly average data. So monthly average is fluctuating. There is a lot of spiking here. So in 2021, so we have got a huge spike. It's a sharp spike. Then consistently it's gone down. Then in 2022, so onwards it started again increasing. Then 2023 it slightly go down, and again in the end of the 2023 it's again going up. So this is the pattern, that's what we are seeing. And based on the pattern, this we developed a model. So this is a prediction is like that. It is going to be slightly coming down in the coming months. So this is a first one. Normally we'll have around 32%. So 32 ppb is going to be in January. So and it may be in June, it may be around 28 ppb. So this is what the forecast for Asia. And Similarly, the Middle East and Africa, this is again you are seeing in the 2023 is having in the beginning, so there's a huge spike in the aflatoxin contamination, in the average contamination. So there's based on that we are having some sort of a flat prediction. So this is coming around 9.1 ppb. So this is and around 9 ppb in June. That's almost a flat forecasting for average. So this is for Africa and Middle East. So next one is Latin America. So Latin America, this is we have seen this in 2021 and 2022. So there is a huge spike. Otherwise, it's almost flat. So it's nearly that almost it is around nearly 5 ppb in the rest of the year. So similarly, we are having the forecast for around 7.7 or 7. Initially, it will be 7.3 ppb, and next one will be 7.2 ppb as a forecast for the June 2024. So finally, that's Europe. So Europe is also because we are seeing a lot of now increase in the aflatoxin contamination as the as climate is changing, and we are seeing in 2020. So we have a small spike, and similarly in the year 2022, there's a huge spike in the aflatoxin contamination. So that means warming, it's a global warming is again affecting Europe a lot. So that's but still even this scenario, I think is the most of the average aflatoxin concentration will be around 2.9 ppb or nearly 3 ppb. That's so this is about the forecasting for aflatoxins for the 4 continents. And the last one is North America. We don't find much concentration. That's why actually we have not produced any prediction model for that. Thank you. This is about the prediction.
It's really exciting to hopefully in the next few years we can change the mycotoxin review into our mycotoxin forecast. We're not quite there yet for all the mycotoxins, but at least for aflatoxin we are getting a data set that is getting more trustworthy, more robust to start carefully predicting what might happen in the coming months. I think that's a really valuable tool for feed producers, for farmers, for nutritionists, formulators to kind of get a feeling of where the risk is, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's going to, absolutely, because that is going to be in the future. So because also we can expect with the other modeling techniques and also using the machine learning or AI-based analysis, we can develop further into this, get deep into the prediction.
It's all in the data.
Yeah, it's all in the data.
So we're going to take you to the final stretch of our presentation. I will invite Dr. Swamy back to the stage. Thank you, Avinash. We will see you again with the Q&A. Keep those questions coming. I see they're still coming in. So Swamy, let's take us through what can we do to mitigate all this risk.
Absolutely, Mars. I know I've been talking a lot about the challenge. The risk is, that's the risk is always there, and it's varying, as we mentioned. And again, thank you, Avinash, for the modeling approach. And I'm a big person talk about the integrated approach about mycotoxin risk management. There is no silver bullet for this. So of course, at different levels, as Avinash mentioned already, the climate change is happening. What's happening in the field can impact. What's happening in the storage can impact at the feed mills or at the grain storage facilities. And what happens, of course, in the feed, on the farm can also have an impact. There are many places, customers ask me, well, I was storing the feed on my farm. Can that have an impact? Yes, of course. If the feed is not stored properly in the small micro silos or micro bins, and in some places uses, of course, the bags, you can have a challenge there. So a holistic approach is very critical, and that's why the mycotoxin risk management has to be done at different levels. Controlling the mold, controlling the hygiene of the feed mill. That's why we call it as a 10-point system for effective mycotoxin risk management. And of course, as a company, we have invested a little bit more into what can we do when we have mycotoxin already inside the animals, right? So we tried everything outside, we educate the farmers, educate the feed mills, but still a certain amount of toxins can get into the system. And I have spent more than 25 years in this area trying to understand, okay, what are the systems that are compromised by the mycotoxins? And this is an evolving science. And now, compared to before, we know that the mycotoxin interactions, different levels of mycotoxins. We didn't get to the interaction part. That's a big science altogether. But we know that different mycotoxins have effect on gut wall, immune system, antioxidant system, and you can name, even there are some mycotoxins impact the blood-brain barrier and the system, the neurological systems as well. So there are toxins which we can manage easily by binding, but there are some we cannot do that, and that is known to the industry. So that's why we need to come up with different technologies, how to improve the gut health with the new technologies available, how to improve the immunity, antioxidant status, and various other technologies we need to look around. And that's why we continually invest in research in finding the right answers. So with that, I would like to conclude that maybe you saw in some of our marketing materials in the past, we mentioned more than 70,000 samples. You wonder why Swamy is showing only more than 65,000. And that's what exactly Avinash was mentioning about cleaning the data. Very critical. We thought it's 70,000, but when Avinash looked into it, there are some data which are not correct. That's why we need to have an analyst like him to get a right information, right? So yeah, around 66,000 samples, as you saw, we analyzed, and we had a 37% contamination was the lowest for okra and 76 for Zaralan. Of course, as expected, aflatoxin was the major toxin in Asia, and Zaralan was major in Latin America and Africa and Middle East. And then we looked at T2, which is a bit of a surprising to me, was the main toxin in Europe. I can see the connection when I was even at the university. I know a lot of T2 toxin issues in Europe because of using the small grains. So yeah, that is a bit of an increasing trend, and T2 is a very, very toxic mycotoxin, and so we need to keep an eye on that. Then of course in North America, we saw higher mycotoxin contamination. It is expected to have high DON, it is expected to have high Zaralan, but it is not expected to have high fumonisin in especially the temperate parts of North America. And when we see those kind of levels, we need to really think about what's the sensitivity of the analysis we are doing. You can always make all the raw materials, all the feed toxic, but then what else is there to feed to the animals, right? So that's a very sustainability point as well we need to keep in mind. So that's why the rapid tests gives that kind of an opportunity for us to see, okay, we are not overtly making it toxic. Then the median mycotoxin concentration, we always believe, is a better way of representing than the average. I think we have been making that point for the last few years already. And then in the latter part of the 2023, we see that DON, ZIA, and OTA ochratoxin concentration in maize started to increase. So we need to be wary of these in the first half of the 2024. Sorry, there's a typo in there. So yeah, we have not used all the grains what we produced in 23. They will be used in 24. So we need to keep an eye on that. And finally, the multiple mycotoxins demands the multiple mode of actions. And we are investing a lot of money in this area to come up with the right solution when you have multiple mycotoxins we know that they are there. So I would like to acknowledge the contribution from our Masterlab team members, our global feed safety team led by Pedro Carmona, and of course our colleagues at GSS, within our organization who are helping us out. So with that, I believe, Marcel, we are into the Q&A session.
Great, welcome Avinash back as well. So just some final questions. Thank you so much for taking us through all the data and explaining what they mean for last year and for the months to come. There are some questions that are coming in that are quite specific to the country. So I'm just going to ask you, but I can imagine you might need to follow up later on in more detail, because they are quite specific on, do we have any information for Uganda and Tanzania?
Yeah, I think certainly we will follow those questions, because in this segment it's difficult to come country-wise. But yeah, great question. We have information, and we see how much is the information is also critical.
Yeah, exactly.
So certainly we can.
Because we have 65,000 data records. Of course, you cannot memorize where everything comes from.
Right.
That's totally understandable. A question that came is whether we have looked at the link between the changes in mycotoxin and in ocean weather patterns. For example, with El Nino and La Nina, do we see any relation between those and the mycotoxin concentrations?
Of course it will. Of course it will. I think that is something that what happens in the ocean have a big impact, especially when you are trading the raw materials. That is why I have a little bit of concern this year that two of the major canals systems in the world is being impacted for different reasons. One in Panama and another in Suez Canal. So that will hold the raw materials a little longer, almost 26% more time these raw materials will stay in the ship. So that can increase the molds growth and mycotoxin production. Of course, the weather conditions play a very important role. And with our little experience, it's not easy to match those, because you need to really have the exact information of the production facility. Let's say Brazil, right? The corn is produced in a specific area in Brazil. And you need to have a lot number of analysis from that region, right? So yes, it is a very important tool to go further, but I think so far it will take a little bit more effort and money into that to get a precise answer.
Question for you, Avinash. I saw in the models for throughout the year that also the fumonisins are getting higher. Is that, do you think that's also related to those longer storage times? Like you see this trend going up. I saw specifically for fumonisins, but it was also the case for others.
Yeah, it may not be a storage problem, because it's already, because when grains are there, it's already there. Mycotoxins are already there. So, but because the grains are mostly produced in certain countries, where many of the things are coming from different countries like US. So then Brazil and South America, Latin America is the major actually producers. So, and also the US, some of the corns are coming from the US and some of the corn from Brazil, because that's again the production time. That's the production that is making the difference. So that's already impacting, because at what time you are impacting. So if you look into the pattern here, for example, whenever there is a down increase, so at the same time the fumonisin is gone down. So that is actually some sort of because it's whatever the data is totally heterogeneous. So because it is not analyzed with so that's why it's actually giving us a pattern. So that's important.
I see. Okay, so actually that is all connected, and it actually relates to the question we got earlier about the different seasons of growing that affect that data. A question that's coming in is how to evaluate the different commercial products. I'm assuming they mean the mycotoxin mitigation agents.
So that's a good question. I think this varies depending on the region of the world, and many countries they look at in vitro studies as a screening methodologies. Very quickly they can do some binding tests. And I think most people also know that sometimes the product may not be very efficient in vitro, but it has come back as a very strong product in vivo. So I think that's why more and more emphasis is given on in vivo system of evaluation. So we should not stop at in vitro, because there are toxins which you cannot bind, and the binding approach will not show up in the in vitro binding. So we should give an opportunity. We should not stop the good products at in vitro studies, because that would be injustice, because the mode of actions are different.
I see. So it's not just about binding the toxins, but actually to enable the animal to also prevent
like them. Some of microbes or enzymes or other gut health promoting concepts and all there. You can't but they will not be reflected in binding.
I see.
Yeah.
We have a few more questions coming in, but also looking at the time, I would like to start wrapping up the session. If more questions come, we will be able to answer them later on. I would just like you to move the slide one more slide, because we have something new for you. We are today launching our MycoBite series, which is a series of 6 short videos that we are launching every 2 weeks for you, where we have Dr. Swamy explain different aspects when it comes to mycotoxin analysis. So very much related to today's topic as well, because of course we love the analysis and we love the data. But if you are a feed miller, a farmer, or quality consultant, it can be sometimes challenging to know exactly what do I analyze, when do I analyze, do I focus only on the raw material, the total feed. There's lots of aspects to take into account. So we have taken the time to create very bite-sized videos for you that hopefully help you guide through different analysis topics. So please feel free to scan the QR code. Watch the first episode, it's actually there already. You can go and watch it right after this webinar. And sign up to receive an alert for the next releases. So with that message, I would like to close today's session. As I mentioned before, we have recorded it, so you will receive the recording of this presentation today. Thank you everybody for joining, and we are looking forward to seeing you next time.